Obsessed with starting on time because my mom was like 5 minutes late everywhere growing up, and so I have this like frantic fear that I'm always going to be somewhere 5 minutes late. But I'm really excited to be here today for two reasons. First, because I strongly believe, and I genuinely believe, that it is through small groups like this and events like this that we will begin to create a world that reflects a better set of values. I look around and I see situations where we've trusted our business leaders, we've trusted our politicians, we've trusted our religious leaders, we've trusted our social institutions, and I don't think that it stretches the imagination to say that has not ended us up in a particularly good place in this world. Now, it's not that those institutions are inherently bad or good. Those are merely reflections of that which is within our own heart. And so to change those institutions, we must reorient that which is within our own hearts and our own minds. The second reason that I'm excited to be here is because so much of what my clients have been feeling, so much of what I've been feeling, so much of what other spiritual teachers and authors that I speak to have been feeling, and no doubt so much of what you have been feeling, is this sense that something is coming on this planet, that there is a change, that in some way we have hit critical mass, and people sense this on a gut level, but they're not able to pinpoint exactly what it is, they're not able to identify exactly what it is, but it's created a sense of urgency in people. More than any other time since I've been doing readings, and I've been doing readings for 8 years, people are coming to me not just wanting specific guidance in their life, although that's a part of it. They're really looking for some type of positive spiritual prescription. What plan can they put in place so that their job will have meaning, so that their relationship will have meaning, so that their words, thoughts, actions, and deeds will have meaning? And I think what happened is we got in this way of thinking in this country, especially, that was very achievement-based, where we thought you get the job and you get the relationship and then essentially you're happy, then essentially it's it, then you have meaning. But that's not the case, because meaning and purpose and passion comes from a place prior to your relationship, prior to your job, prior to whatever achievements you may or may not have racked up. And when in that place of being, when you resonate with meaning and purpose, then you attract a relationship that mirrors that. You attract a job that allows you to actualize your talents. You know, that any situation in your life has that sense of meaning within it. And I think we've gotten away from developing this sense of meaning because so many people, I think, were turned off by the fundamentalism of religion that they threw out spirituality with it. So people threw out both baby and bathwater. Why is this a problem? Because it's not that we became a godless nation, it's just that we invested our faith in all the wrong things. So now we had new gods, which were houses and SUVs and corporate profit and shareholder profit. So it's not that we became faithless, you know, in any way, because to be human is to have faith. It's just about where are we investing our energy. And so anytime you don't have transcendence, which is to say anytime you don't have a grounding value, you destroy either what you have or you sabotage something that is good. I mean, we can see this in our own country. Only a decade ago we had extraordinary economic growth. The wage disparity was thinking we did not hold this. Why? Because it wasn't based on wage equality, it wasn't based on fairness, it wasn't based on creating quality jobs, it was based on shareholder profit and corporate profit. So because it did not originate from a good value system, we sabotaged it. The same is true in your own life. Try holding a good relationship when you don't love yourself. Try holding a good job when you don't feel worthy. Try making good financial investments when you don't feel qualified to do so. So it's the same of the life of an individual or a collective. And indeed, spiritually, what we think individually is not then separate from what happens in our world. So what I'd like to talk to you about today is how can we reconnect with that highest part of ourselves? How can we place a value on the project of transcendence? And how can we place a value on going within so that we can learn to listen to our own intuition? And listening to that intuition then is so important so we can put it into use in our life to improve our life. Because let me tell you something, the universe is not picking favorites. You might think like, oh, everything is going so well for everybody else but not me. But that thought you have and then what happens are linked. So if you think, you know, everybody else is getting the relationship and everybody else is getting the job, the universe will demonstrate that to you, but not because it's picking on you, because it's responding to the content of your thoughts and your mind. So spiritually, you're not just accountable for what you do. You are accountable for what you think, which includes your thoughts about yourself. And I think our thoughts about ourselves have so much to do with how we treat other people. I don't know anybody that is mean to people that feels great about themselves. And it's like most of us are so good at judging people because we've spent a lifetime using ourselves as test subjects. And usually when I'm judging something, someone or a situation, it's because they stoke some fear in me, because I see that capacity in me. So if I'm saying, gosh, that person is so short-tempered, it's because I know that I have that ability to be short-tempered within myself. So I'd like to talk to you about how can we connect to this part of ourselves. For me, my journey with intuition and psychic ability started really young. I told my preschool teacher when I was 5 years old that I was a psychic. You can imagine how completely not amused she was by this revelation. And I was lucky to have a mother who was very progressive and not judgmental, and who just said, you know, as long as you work hard, I don't much care what you do, which was very liberating. But even at that, I never thought that I would do readings for anybody. In fact, I didn't want to. So I went about my life on my plan, and I went to college, and I lost somebody very, very close to me. And just a few months after her passing, it's like I was in one of these places where I thought like I could just go on as if nothing had changed. And yet my world had radically changed, my value system had radically changed, everything I thought that I knew had radically changed. And she came through to me in my dorm room one night. I was very depressed, and there she was. And she said, you're going to do readings for people, and you're going to write, and you're going to travel, and you're going to do all these things. And I said, well, thank you. That's very gratifying. But no, I'm not. And I went right back to my own way of doing things. 6 months later, through a turn of events, an odd turn of events, I found myself doing readings for people, going on radio shows, writing, and then ultimately, through that, I was led to really consider deeply the project of spirituality, which is so much of what I care about now. I think when I started doing readings, I was reluctant, and I was very young, and I thought, I have to demonstrate this ability to people. I have to prove this ability. And it was good insofar as it motivated me to work very hard. And it was good insofar as it taught me to take natural gift and turn it into channelable ability. But it was bad insofar as that I didn't realize when I had made it. I didn't realize when it was time to stop proving myself to people and start just getting on with the work of love, you know, and getting on with the work of spirit and getting on with the work of the universe, and stop making it about myself. So since that time, I've been incredibly blessed. I've read for people on every continent, Antarctica accepted. I have worked with the police and private detectives on some of the major missing persons cases of our time. I have participated in scientific research on mediums, which I'll talk to you about a little bit more. So I've been extraordinarily blessed in my work. But intuition is not reserved for me. It is not something that you have to rely on a psychic to go to. I mean, a psychic reading is a great tool if you're in a great place to use that tool. Just like hypnosis, just like yoga, just like meditation, just like talk therapy, just like journaling, just like, you know, any other tool that you could think of. But a psychic reading is not meant to do the work for you. A psychic reading is not about you bypassing your life. It's not about you bypassing your experience. It's about you becoming fully present in the experience of being human, so that when the hard times hit, so that when the turbulent moments in your life hit, you are empowered to deal with those situations with resolve. So let's take a step back for a minute. What is spirituality? Spirituality is the way you get to know your own soul. It's the way you better get to know the highest part of yourself. Intuition is one vehicle by which you can become more spiritual. Intuition says we can't rely on our politics to save us, we can't rely on our business to save us, we can't rely on our institutions to save us. It's time to step up and save ourselves. Intuition says that not only do we have the capacity to get access about any situation in our life, but indeed we have an obligation to get and then use that information about any situation in our life. Situations arise all the time in our life where we get information outside our normal five senses. And this isn't like, it's not like you have to rely on me saying it or your own subjective experience. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of stories of people who have, you know, woken up across town because their daughter had a nightmare, or, you know, felt something throughout their body the moment a relative passed. And you go back at any point in history, and the stories are so remarkably similar that it quite literally defies logic and good thinking to not attribute it to intuition. And science is linking up with this, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. So intuition says that at any moment in your life, when you are ready, and I think that's the key, because quite frankly, I know when I'm ready to be happy, and I know when I'm ready to be miserable. On some level. You know, sometimes it's on the conscious level, sometimes it might be, you know, much more deeper down. I often tend to do one of these, like, well, I'm deserving of good things, you know, like these 5 good things. But really, like, you're deserving of every single good thing. It's like I tell people, imagine all your dreams came true. Or imagine you had the willingness to ask that all of your dreams come true. At that, you would only have begun to understand that you are asking for only a fraction of what you are worth. And that's how limited we've become in humanity. That's how limited we've become by only listening to our ego mind. We feel guilty for asking that something good happens to us. I think that's really depressing. And what's depressing about it is, what would you say to your child? Because you wouldn't say to your child, like, oh, you're only worth like 6 good things in your life, so choose wisely. Choose wisely. No, you would say you're a deserving child of the universe. So if you would apply that standard to your child, you have to apply that standard to yourself. Spiritually, there's not separation. Right? You're the same as the person sitting next to you. You're thinking like, I don't like what that person is wearing. It doesn't matter. You're linked. You're linked to the person sitting next to you. And so spiritually, we have to come to a higher understanding. Think about a problem in your own life right now. It could be with a coworker, it could be with a relationship, it could be with a financial issue, and whatever that situation is, whatever situation came to the forefront of your mind, let that be the situation, and apply this principle. At this very moment, I have the ability to get all of the information that I need to resolve this situation perfectly. Think how different your life would be if not even if you applied that to 100% of the situations in your life, but maybe to like 25% of them. If you gave yourself 5 minutes to say, gee, what could I learn here? What could I listen to here? I know this in my own life. When I rush through my day, never taking 5 minutes to take a step back, I'm not a particularly pleasant person to deal with. When I have my list and I'm not deviating from my list, I'm not a person that you want to be around. But if I take 5 minutes to take a step back to say, what could I learn here? And indeed, what could I bring to the situation here? Then that radically alters the way that my day happens. I think so many of us feel like there's not enough time, like everything is compressing and it's moving so quickly. But when you take the time to do this, time itself literally slows down and you begin to view your life not as a series of situations, but as a series of moments. And when life becomes a series of moments, you have a series of choices. If I could broadcast one message to the world, it would be a contradiction to this idea that we are very small. It's like we've convinced ourselves we're powerless, we've convinced ourselves we're small, and there's a very good reason we've done this, because then we have no responsibility for anything. It's like if we say one person could change the world, which indeed they can and have and continue to do so, if we like embraced that, then we wouldn't be able to say, oh gee, well I couldn't do anything about this. There's more smallness inside your body than largeness in the nuclear galaxy. There are more cells in your body than stars in our galaxy. I mean, from a cosmic perspective, you are not small. So we need intuition to serve as an arbitrator of truth. It's our spiritual sieve, it's our spiritual GPS. So what I encourage you to do is to run these situations in your life through your spiritual sieve. Why don't we? This goes to the question of worthiness. We don't feel that we're worth having that information. We feel like it's reserved for somebody else. We don't give ourselves permission to. And I'm not criticizing anybody. Obviously, this starts very young for many of us as we feel that we're not good enough, or we feel this desire to prove what we're worth to the people in our lives, or we feel that we'll be more lovable if we work harder, or if we give more, even when we're exhausted. And so it begs the question of, what am I worth? You are worth going into any situation in your life empowered. You are worth going into any situation in your life informed and with knowledge. if you don't have some way to arbitrate truth, then you're just relying on the political winds of the time, or the religious winds of the time, or the business winds of the time. It's like, how has that worked? But when you go inside, when you close your eyes and ask yourself, what are the things that really matter? You come up with some pretty simple things, which indeed are the things that all spiritual traditions across all time have come up with. Ideas like love is better than fear. Integrity and fairness are better than greed. Collaboration always, without exception, produces better results than competition. It's like people blame God for like all the problems we have here. Like, of course there couldn't be a God, because why are there problems? It's like there are also solutions. We are not down here alone. It's like we have all the solutions we need to all of our problems. I mean, look at hunger. It's not like we don't have enough food to feed this planet right now. Look at air pollution. It's not like there aren't many, many scientific and intellectual solutions to this. But I think it's easier for people, you know, to blame God, as opposed to perhaps saying, you know, we are here with everything we need, we have not chosen to use it. And it's not that we just do that in some big macro level thing, we do that in our own life. I mean, how often are we blaming someone else for some place that we've gotten ourselves? Or for a situation we created? It's not that there's not transgression, it's not that there's not hurt and pain. That's very real from a spiritual perspective. Or excuse me, from a human perspective. But oftentimes, if someone is mean, negative, or nasty to you, you recognized it in the first 10 minutes of knowing that person. You might have decided not to set a boundary. You might have decided to allow that person in, but it isn't that you got there in a day. It isn't that you know, that you were a complete victim in the situation. And so sometimes I think judge not lest ye be judged means I need to clean up my own backyard before I'm concerned with what anyone else is doing. And it's a lifetime. For me, I feel like it's a multi-lifetime thing to clean out that backyard. So the first reason that we need intuition is so that we have some way to determine the core truths of the universe that isn't just subject to adjustment based on who is in power. Then we get into hastily justified foreign wars. Then we get into situations like, you know, Hitler in World War II. Then we get into situations where we're just listening to the most charismatic person. You know, that's not a way to create a sustainable future. And indeed, that's not a way to go about your own life. The second reason that we need intuition is because we need it to affirm a fundamental truth, which is this. We are divinely connected to every other being on this planet. You know, I mentioned that there is no separateness from a spiritual perspective. This doesn't mean that sometimes we don't feel very far away from the people in our life. But that's only because we've forgotten a core truth about ourselves, which is that we are unlimited beings of light. You know, people say there's all this business of we're here to learn lessons, we're here to learn lessons, we're here to learn lessons. It's like, I don't necessarily look at it like that. I look at it as we're here to remember that which we already know. So you might have forgotten what you're capable of. But as I look at the world, that's not the case. The person I lost, who is the reason that I do readings, was blind, and she always told me that one of the great gifts of being blind was that you look around the world and you get to see people for who they really are. You're not so concerned with someone's appearance or you know, their mannerisms, that you really get to relate to them on a deep human level. I feel like that is the gift of being psychic. That when I look around the world, you know, I see possibility. I see potential. I see people who are only obstructed by virtue of the belief that they are not worthy or capable. You know, I travel a lot and I say something which I think is so self-evident and such a basic truth, which is, you are so worth being loved. And this is often what kind of moves people the most. And I think that that's an indicator that we can do better in our world. When I talk about sitting with yourself and saying I love you to yourself, when I talk about self-worth, I think there's this tendency for people to think like, oh yeah, positive thinking, I feel pretty good, we're all special. That's a surface level. That's the surface level. That's like the first level of thought. Deep spiritual truths are not just about positive thinking. If you are in a good place spiritually, it is true that then positive thoughts will flow. But I mean, to just throw a bunch of positive thoughts over, misery and pain, to not actually heal that part of yourself that is causing the problem, that is not spiritual. Walking around your life going, oh, everything's wonderful, when it's not. That's not spiritual. So when I talk about sitting with yourself and saying I love you to yourself, what I'm talking about is that you say it both to the parts that you like and to the parts that you don't like. All those parts of you that you think nobody could love. All those parts of you that you think make yourself so unattractive. And oftentimes those are the qualities that people want to see more of. Oftentimes your vulnerability is what makes you so beautiful. Not some false demonstration of strength. And this idea of connectivity, it's not just a few random people at Spiritual Expos talking about this anymore. In fact, science is validating this belief. I was working on a book I'm writing recently. It's called Simply Spiritual: 7 Steps to Creating a Meaningful Life. And, I wrote a sentence in there that said, once viewed as an enemy, science is on track to become the biggest defender of contemporary spirituality. There's an author by the name of Lynne McTaggart. She writes a lot about how we're connected, and she writes about this quantum field and this zero-point field. And it's interesting and mostly above me. I keep rereading it, thinking that I'll come to some better understanding of it, and I don't. So I just sort of take the parts that work for me and leave the rest. But she writes about this study on prayer, and there have been many studies that said when you do prayer, not goal-oriented prayer, not God give me this or God give me that. That makes God Santa Claus. I mean, that makes God your guidance counselor. No, the enlightened prayer is, dear God, put me where I need to be. The enlightened prayer is, dear God, may I know the enlightened prayer. So there have been all these studies done, that when you give this kind of, a lot of them have been done on plants, but when you do this kind of prayer that says, go to your highest good, that the plants do better, they grow better. And then when you pray over a plant and say, well, get very strong and get very green, they actually shrivel. But there's another study on prayer that Lynne McTaggart writes about, in which they had 2 groups of people with sepsis. Sepsis is when your organs shut down. It's what a lot of the Jews during the Holocaust died of. And so one group was prayed over and one group was not. And the group that was prayed over got better faster. So that's not that unusual, except for the fact that the people were sick in the early 90s and the prayer didn't take place until the 2000. So it's this idea of time is more circular than we think. The intention for prayer had been set. No one prayed until the year 2000 and the people still got better. And this is the type of science that it's not like I got this on somebody's Facebook or somebody's blog. I mean, this is from the National Institute of Health. So this business about, it's unenlightened to be spiritual, this business about, it's woo-woo or it's new agey is not really in line, I think, with what science is telling us. Then you look at somebody like Pim van Lommel, who is doing all this research on near-death experiments, a very, very well-respected scientist internationally. You look at someone like Julie Beischel, who is doing all of this research on psychics and mediums. You look at the research that is happening with past life regression. And so what you see is that very serious people now are asking very serious questions. I participated in scientific research on mediums. It's what's called a quintuple blind study. So there are 5 blinds on the study. So I never see the person I'm reading for. They never see me. The researcher doesn't they send 2 readings. The researcher doesn't know which is my reading and which is the control reading. So there's 5 blinds on this study. I'm very gratified because out of 8 mediums I was the most accurate. And that's not to stoke my own ego. That's simply to say that many, many of us in the spiritual community believe that science it's the best mechanism by which we have to understand our world. I mean, science and spirituality need each other. Spirituality needs science so that it can continue to make sense. Like, there's no business walking around claiming the earth is only, a few thousand years old when it clearly is not. That's not enlightened. Digging your heels in the mud and going, this is true because we once thought it was. I mean, I don't see the efficacy in that at all. And then science needs spirituality so that it can remain ethical. So that we take things like human test subjects very seriously. So that we don't arbitrarily sacrifice human life in the interest of science. And so I think, and we also know then that people who are more spiritual have higher GPAs. People that have degrees in hard science are more likely to believe in an afterlife than people who have humanities degrees. So this, Dean Radin writes a lot about this idea of the stupidity hypothesis, that, if you believe in the afterlife, if you believe in spirituality, if you believe in psychic abilities, that you're stupid. That's a myth. The opposite is true. We find the more educated people are, the more likely they are to have some type of spiritual grounding, the more likely they are to have some belief in an afterlife, some belief in the paranormal, some belief. And I think that's very, very exciting. But I think as spiritual people, we need to be better at making the argument. Because what has happened, and partly due to media, again, which is merely a reflection of us, but is that a very few amount of really, really loud skeptics have come to dominate the debate. Many with absolutely zero scientific credentials. And so I think we have to change the conversation to one that says both science and spirituality are valuable, and indeed they're not in conflict, and perhaps we would get better results if we started from that premise. And none of this you have to leave to blind faith. I mean, like, try for 1 month to change your thoughts. Or try for 1 month waking up in the morning and going, I'm a child of the universe deserving of miracles, and see if your life isn't different. I'm not suggesting you rely on blind faith. What I'm suggesting is the universe will respond to the content of your thoughts. Not maybe, not probably, not it will for the people that it likes more. It will. And I think that sometimes for me is scary. Sometimes I am more scared of my success than I am of my failure, because I know what my failure feels like. So I find myself limiting myself at all of these levels. So you have to unpack those. And then I think this is critical. You have to forgive yourself when you fail to. And for me, that self-forgiveness part of it is very, very tricky. So the second reason that we need intuition is because we have become so disconnected in this world that we need a way to affirm the truth that we are not separate. And when you affirm that truth, then you don't do cruel things to yourself, because you realize in doing that you are doing cruel things to other people. That when you are short with yourself, you are short to others. And when you are cruel to other people, you also do yourself a disservice. That's why spirituality is a self-interested venture. It makes your life better. It's not this martyrdom idea. It's not this spiritual poverty idea. It's that your life becomes better when you forgive people and let things go. Your life becomes better when you ask the universe for wisdom and guidance. Your life becomes better when you treat yourself kinder. And then that in turn has so much to do with what happens at your job and in your relationship and how you react in X, Y, and Z interaction. The third reason why we need intuition is for the practical reasons. It can make our life better. I work with the police and private detectives on a very limited basis. I don't charge for this work, and it takes a toll on me. It's a difference between someone sitting down for a reading with me that's a co-created experience. They want me to have that information so that I can give it back to them in a way that will be useful. When I tune into a criminal case, the criminal does not want me to have information. And there are all these things like the police's ego, which I've really come to appreciate more than resent. And so there are all these different factors. So intuition has practical effects in that it can help us catch criminals, in that it can help police and private investigators look at a case in a slightly different way. And often it is just that slight tweaking that then allows them to do their job so much better. We can think about if before you went into a job interview, you asked, what is the one piece of information I need to land this job? And then you gave yourself permission to get it. You know, there was a client that I read for, and she had a child who was very sick. He was in a lot of pain when he was about 4 or 5, to the point where he would scream, you know, to leave the house and go to school in the morning, and she knew something was wrong. And she took him to doctor after doctor after doctor who said that there was nothing wrong. that he was faking it, or that it was psychological, and that the best thing to do would be to make him go to school. So she did. But something nagged at her that there was more to this situation than she knew. And it took some time, but eventually she listened to that, and she sought out doctors, and she sought out doctors, and she sought out doctors, and finally she found someone who was able to diagnose him with a very, very rare immune disorder, which caused muscle spasms and pain, which could cause excruciating pain. I mean, imagine this woman's horror after sending her child on the bus to school, after knowing in her heart of hearts that something was wrong. I applaud her for listening to that intuition and for seeking out the solution and for getting her child help. But what I hope this illustrates to you is that we can get very concrete pieces of information designed to improve our life. And she felt so much guilt about not listening to it immediately. And then she had to heal and resolve all of that. And it ate at her. And I think lots of times this happens in our life. I mean, I relate to it very strongly with relationships. You know, I was in a relationship and I was very lonely at the end of it, and all I wanted was to be with someone kind after that relationship, you know. And so that's what I said. I said I want to be with somebody kind, and I'm not taking anything else, and I was very firm. And, you know, I did indeed get somebody very, very kind in my life, but I had not done the work of looking at what I had done in my past relationship. Like, maybe I was lonely and it wasn't totally the other person's fault. I had not done the deep spiritual work of healing myself. I had closed that part of my intuition off because I didn't want to hear it, quite frankly. And I wasn't ready to hear it. And I lost my relationship with this very, very kind person. I sabotaged it. I couldn't hold it. And so I think oftentimes we have this nagging suspicion that something is wrong or something is not right. We don't listen to it. And then even though it turns out to be right, it's like we just keep in the pattern of not listening to it. So what I encourage you to do today is to reverse that pattern of not listening to it. To say right here and right now that I am ready to get the information that I need to make my life better. And I'm struck by something that Marianne Williamson says, which is this idea of you don't have to accomplish it all overnight. You simply have to be willing. And that's what I'm saying. Don't rely on my word. Don't rely on an academic paper. Simply put it into practice in your own life and allow the universe to demonstrate it to you. Sometimes I think how different our world would be if instead of saying to our children, you are poor, miserable sinners, we said, you are a child of the universe, miracles follow you wherever you go. If we instilled in our children the belief that responding from a place of love, far from being a weakness, is the most demonstrably strong thing they could do. And indeed, I think shifting this perspective is critical to the survival of our planet. And so what I ask of you is that as you go back home and as you experience the rest of this expo and as you go back to the rest of your communities, that you take what has been planted here, the spark that has been ignited here, and you allow yourself to open up to your own intuition. And in doing that, then you will know that no matter what hardship you face, no matter what struggle you're going through, no matter what self-judgment you're imposing on yourself, regardless of any of that, you will be gifted with the knowledge that the universe is already sending the perfect solution your way. Thank you so much, guys. Does anyone have any questions for me about anything that I've said? Mm-hmm.
Talking about when you are ready, like when to be ready. Can you say that?
Yeah. So it's like I think of people who seem to have had an expanded state of awareness on this planet. So like Jesus or Buddha or Gandhi, or there's a Hindu philosopher I'm very fond of named Krishnamurti, So I look at these people who seem to live in like the step before everything happens, and I think of like, most of us probably are not going to get there. You know, I don't know that I'm not going to become Jesus in this life. I'm not going to expand my consciousness enough to become Buddha in this life so that I could just deal with every situation, you know, on a completely balanced level. But I think that anytime you're not getting what you want, or anytime a situation is not working out in the way that you desire, it's because on some level you are limiting yourself. There is some belief inside yourself that is preventing you from healing, preventing that good thing from coming in. Oftentimes, I think that belief is this idea of micromanaging. You know, I tell people, don't micromanage the miracle. Because sometimes we go, well, I'll be happy if this happens or this happens. But I think sometimes when you have that view, you foreclose a third way. And the reason that we do this, I think, eternally is because we don't want to be disappointed. We are governed by this belief that something worse could happen, which is in fact not the way that the universe works. The universe works in the opposite way because the universe is always expanding, it's always growing, it's always evolving. And so I think the idea of restricting or limit is an interesting thing, because sometimes what we think is that we think we're thinking in a very abundant way, right? Because we think like, if we go, oh, I want this job, and I'll just resonate with it and it'd be perfect. But sometimes, like, in saying that, you foreclose all of the other things from happening. And so sometimes I think it's about simply saying, I'm willing for the best thing to happen. And then I think it's about examining, when did you start believing that you weren't? So I think for many people, this is in childhood. You know, and some of it I think is that we have such an emphasis on conformity and rules, and so in just trying to teach our children how to function in society, which is important, and I'm not suggesting we abandon it, but I think sometimes in doing that, what we end up actually saying to our children is, you're not good enough how you are. And I think so many of us take that in. So when I say, you know, you can be as happy as you're ready to be, what I mean is, when you are willing to heal the parts of yourself that are limiting you, then you can have that next step. It's like, there is no situation that doesn't have a perfect resolution. And this is why, you know, like when things are going well in my life, I have no problem applying this principle. I'm like, yeah, great, yeah, of course. There is a perfect solution, I'm living it. And then, you know, then life throws me a curveball. And all of a sudden I'm like, this doesn't seem like a perfect solution, God, you know, or universe, or whatever terminology is that you use, or highest self. And so, but those are the moments when it's the most important, because those are the moments when we've forgotten that our natural state is one of grace. And usually when I found myself in those situations, it's because I've been overanalyzing, I've been overthinking, I've been mucking things up all along the way. I wasn't setting a boundary. It's like, I think love is like the value, you know, that's it. That's what we should be doing. That's what our corporation should be doing. That's what we should be living by politically. That's what we should be doing in our own life. Love is a prescription for fixing everything that we have. But it's not loving of someone to like give of yourself until you're exhausted. It's not loving of yourself to enable somebody else's bad habits. It's not loving of yourself to go along with a relationship or a career path that's not meeting your needs. So being loved does not mean like be a doormat. And I think that's what's hard, because we want to be good people, we want to be compassionate people, and sometimes in all of that, we end up doing things that are really unloving, that are really unkind, that are really unspiritual. And I think the question of self-worth is so critical, because, for instance, if it was a situation in a job, or if it was a situation financially that you just feel like is never working out, that is because on some level you feel like it's not worth it working out for you. And this is why I think, you know, as I mentioned, going beyond just this idea of, oh, I feel good, oh, I feel special. Well, that's you know, that's rain on the windshield, that's nothing. That doesn't offer you a way forward. You can't say, I think I'm worthy, but I won't get this or this one. I mean, that's completely disconnected. If you thought you were worthy, you would be worthy of the best job for you. And also, I think it goes back to this sense of purpose. I think one thing that's happened in the New Age community, we've gotten very into this, well, what's my life lesson? What's my life purpose? That's a very valuable question to ask. But nobody's life purpose is to like be an attorney or to be a dentist or to be a teacher or to be a social worker. No, you're not, your purpose, your function, why you are here, is to be a being of unlimited potential that lives love and chooses love in every situation. That's your function. That's your job. And when you're living that, it's like when you're doing that job, then you're going to attract the right job to you. When you're dating yourself, when you are pampering yourself, you will attract somebody who does that to you. So anytime you think of a situation in your life that you think is external, it's probably not. It's not to say that like the external is zero. It's not to say that nothing has any effect. But it is to say that the solution to that does not lie outside of yourself. It lies within. And quite frankly, I don't know of any major spiritual tradition that doesn't place some emphasis on going within. It's like A Course in Miracles says peace is an attribute in you. In Neil Donald Walsh's book and in his conversation with God, God writes, if you refuse to go within, you go without. The pagan author Starhawk wrote, know this, if that which you seek is not found inside yourself, you will not find it outside. And this also begs the self-worth question because we think, well, who am I to determine a core truth about the universe? What do you mean, who are you? It's not about who you are, it's your job. It's your divine right. So, but if we do not come from that place, then nothing will reflect that. It's like nothing built on dysfunction will then be functional, Like, just like if you, and people know this in their own life, whether it's starting a relationship or starting a job and you just don't feel right, that's all you'll see in that situation, regardless of what the objective truth is. Did that answer your question a little bit? Anyone else? Thank you so much, guys. I hope you'll come see me, get a reading with me. Then I would also mention, if you go to my website, I do write a daily spiritual soundbite. It comes at 6 a.m. It's just a great way to start your morning. I'm not a morning person, but I found if I start with something spiritual, it makes a big difference. And also, if you go to my website and sign up for that, you'll get a free gift as well. Thank you so much, guys.
Immediately, right now. Because I know when I stopped over there.